All right, so let's get into the combat piece. Welcome to the archive, Brotherhood of the Arrow and Sword. I have two of its very fine members, Bryan and Lady Evie. How are you both doing this morning?
Doing good.
Doing quite well.
All right, so let's get started. You guys are a reenactment troupe, and I've seen you a couple of times at some of the Renaissance fairs. How did this whole thing get started?
Well, so we were members of a prior reenactment group.
Two different groups.
Groups.
Two different groups.
Yeah, two different groups, and that's how most of the presenters in the Brotherhood met, was through these groups. And we decided at a certain point in time, around roughly 2014, 2015. Yeah, we decided, you know what, let's just form an educational based medieval reenactment group, because those other groups were just focusing on, shall we say, just getting into events and having fun and not doing a lot of stuff. And they just wanted to fight. Whereas we wanted to go more towards the educational aspect and more real reenactment and so forth. And so myself, Lady Evelyn, one of our other presenters, Master Marcus, and now Sir Kyle, we formed the Brotherhood and just started doing public events, and anyone who really wanted to hire us brought us in for public events, culture affairs, or high school or school events. And we ended up leaving those other groups and going primarily with this group. And the organizers from those events that had hired those events turned around and said, you know what, we like what you guys are doing. We're going to bring you in as the reenactment group for these events. And because we really put in, right off the bat, we put in a lot of effort, energy, and money into our displays, our presentations, the weapons, the armor, just to have, from the ground up, from the get-go, have a really good look to the group. And that's what we really wanted to do. And we were kind of successful. I don't know what you think, Evie, but yeah, we were, people tell us that we did okay.
I'd say we're successful. We get as many shows as we can handle in a year. So
yeah, we're actually turning away shows at the current moment.
Yes.
Mostly due to distance and so forth, because there's a certain amount of distance that I'm willing to let our presenters travel, and because it just gets too ridiculous with the amount of stuff that we carry to and from an event, and the amount of time it takes for us to set up our displays, our encampment, and so forth.
Yeah, and you guys wear like full body plate mail. Some of you got some pretty elaborate armor, and then when I've seen you guys, you've always had a nice array of medieval weapons set up. And then you have typically a couple of tents. Evie, I've seen sewing and working on a couple other art pieces normally. Is that something that people can also find added to your display when people see you at the fairs?
So at the fairs, we usually try to have a wide range. I always try to bring a couple of fiber arts that are not as common nowadays to basically pique people's interest, get them wondering what it is that I'm doing or what is it that I'm using. So bring that over. That helps with the amount of stuff that I bring is all of the fiber arts. And Lady Amanda also brings her fiber arts. So between the two of us, we usually have quite a display, because we want to show more than just the fighting. And that was, again, why we started the Brotherhood, was that historical aspect, but also that broader aspect. In some of the earlier groups, the women of the group had a lot of a harder time getting a say, getting a spot. We were often just off to the side, sitting in the grass, hanging out throughout the day with nothing to do. And the Brotherhood, we actually bring everybody in. We have all sorts of setups, from cooking. We've had woodworking, we've had metalworking, we've got fiber arts. So we want to include everybody who likes the 15th century and doesn't necessarily want to just hit people with swords. That's our fun part. That's the part that draws in the crowds and that we really enjoy doing. But we did want to do a lot more than just hit with swords. And for the setup, we usually have at least what, 4 or 5 tents each setup.
At a minimum,
and that's
yeah.
actually some of the heaviest equipment is the tents and the poles.
Yeah, we can currently we can go up to 12 tents in our encampment. We have the capacity. Myself, I have 6 tents, and then everyone else brings their own living accommodations, as it were.
And I have 2 tents. Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah. So you guys got to do all of that yourselves as well, probably.
Yeah.
You got to really take the time. Yeah. And so that's, that stuff's difficult. I'm curious, are your tents or your encampments able to withstand storm winds?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they have.
Yeah, we have, there have been a couple of events where we survived microcells. We've survived in thunderstorms, hurricane force winds, where a lot of the other vendors or groups, their tents have gone down or just gone away, literally. There was this year, the New Hampshire Renaissance Fair. In between the 2 weekends the New Hampshire Renaissance Fair ran, we had a microcell event come through, or a wind event come through, and a lot of the vendors lost all their aluminum framed pop-up tents because they either didn't stake them down properly, or they were just too light, or not weighted down or set up properly in between the 2 weekends. So they went flying like Dorothy in the house. And we had no issues. Well, we had 1 or 2 issues in our encampment. That was just minor ripping.
Yeah.
From the wind.
Okay.
And part of that is the setup. So even a few of the canvas tents had problems, but I have to give props to Bryan. He usually shows up at events the Friday beforehand by about noon, and he's setting up from noon until the rest of us can get there at 5 or 6, setting up all the tents and ensuring everything is staked down and it is as secure as it can possibly be, because we never know what kind of weather we're going to face when we're out in the field. So it is set up for all circumstances when we set up our displays.
I'm waiting for snow in April.
All right. So is it also set up like how somebody back in the day would have set it up, back in the 15th century, you'd say?
Not really. So they would have had a centralized location for the commanders of the armies. So we're talking about an army for an encampment. They would have had a centralized location and then sort of built off of that. The way we do it is we tend to do in more or less a linear fashion, where we have 2 end caps on the encampment, where we have our display tent, which is right next to our fight ring presentation ring. And then at the far end, if we have our medieval cook, Allyson Szabo, with us, we will set up our brand new kitchen tent at the far end. So we have a walkthrough of the encampment. So there's displays at almost every single tent that we have set up, and patrons come in and they can see, touch, feel, handle anything we have, almost anything. Let me say almost anything we have. They can't touch the presenters, but anything we have on the displays.
Yeah, we do have to make some accommodations for the Renaissance Fair. So there are a few things that we do in our setup that are not as accurate, just so that we can make it more comfortable for patrons, or more inviting, because we want everybody to be able to feel like they can come in. Now, sometimes it does go a little too far. We've had patrons try to come into our personal sleeping tents. And that's where we're like, okay, no. Just let's
or do
outside the
other
tent.
things to the tents. So we don't talk about that in public.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. So so you guys have cooking displays now. That's a new thing. You have art like woodworking, metalworking, fiberworks, and then you have the bread and butter, the combat tent. So is this all directly from 15th century, along the lines of the work that would have been there? Is it from earlier time periods?
So most of it is towards the 15th century, but we do have some things in the encampment that can go earlier. It is not unusual to see people in our encampment that are in more 14th century attire or using things from the 14th century. But depending on your wealth level, you would have, if you had, a cast iron piece of cookware, you would have kept it for as long as you could. You wouldn't necessarily have gotten rid of it. So we did try to keep within the idea that things that would have been around at the time were there, and we tried to avoid anything from the future in our case. We don't want to have any Renaissance or 16th century that's visible or used. So we do try to keep that down.
Yeah, and
we will have a range.
Yeah, we do try to minimize the amount of modern day accoutrements in the encampment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also very very noticeable. Whenever I've walked through, I've never really noticed anything plastic, single use, bagged things also. So is the chef always cooking for you guys just round the clock when you're at the encampment?
Yeah, go ahead. Evie. Yeah.
She keeps pretty busy. In the morning she'll get breakfast. Lunch is usually cold. What you can grab, what's left over from lunch, cheese, fruit, and then there's usually some dinner that she'll cook up for us. We never know what we're going to get, though. It all depends on what she decides that she wants to try for that weekend. So in the morning, I'm always going over to find out, all right, so what do we have today?
Which is really awesome, because after hours, when the fair shuts down, usually we all gather around our fire pit, and there's the food there, and then we bring in extra food, and a lot of our Renaissance Fair friends come and join us around the fire of our encampment. And so we have a little a camp out with live music and period correct, well, not period correct, but period style live music. Sometimes there's dancing, other things going on, a lot of singing.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It can be. It can be.
Yeah. So throughout the day, you guys do two shows. You do one kind of late morning and then one towards the afternoon, if that's correct. And so in between, so what are you guys doing sort of in between to help educate people on things historically?
That's when we're inviting people into the encampment and having them come in, take a look, try on armor. They can put on helmets, pick up gloves, pick up a sword, see what it would have felt like. They can go around, look at what the cooking is happening, take a look at the fiber arts, learn a skill. Myself or Lady Amanda are usually quite open to demonstrating, teaching, and that usually keeps us fairly busy. And then it takes the knights a good 45 minutes to an hour to get themselves prepared for a battle. So between lunch and preparation, the time for them is actually quite short between the shows.
Yeah, we're usually pretty swamped in the encampment. Now, to give you a frame of reference, and as you know, Garrett, Lady Evelyn, her fiber arts display is a working display, because she sets up a loom that she is, throughout the day or throughout the weekend, she is making a piece of clothing on that. And then she also has various other fiber arts set up. And Lady Amanda has a working fiber arts display where she's got, I don't know if you can see behind me these dolls, but she's got these handmade dolls that she makes, and the dolls that are on display are wearing children's clothing from the time period that she handmade. And she's got other variations of fiber arts as well. Nice. And she's constantly doing her fiber arts too.
Yeah. All right. Are any of those the ones that you showed behind? Were those made at a fair at one point?
No, those are a special project that she's working on, that aren't finished and haven't been finished for about a year and a half now. So they'll be finished soon. But the ones that she usually makes the ones that she displays at the fair. She makes at here either at my place or her place.
Both Lady Amanda and I find that actually trying to accomplish a project at the fair weekend is impossible. You're stopping so many times that if you have to, keep count or anything like that, you've completely forgotten what the count is, or you alter what you're doing to show somebody how to do it or let them try. So usually what we do at the fairs end up just being just display pieces or used for various things later on, but they're not of high quality just because of our distractions and teaching during the process.
Yeah. So are you finding a lot that there's like a huge influx of people also interested in these small things too, like knitting together a doll, knitting together a piece of clothing, working with wood? Like a lot of people are so infatuated from the earlier time periods with combat, but are people becoming more interested too in these everyday people, like everyday things that people did?
I would say so. I usually get a number of people that contact me after for references or places to go to find out how to pick up the crafts. I think in general there is an upswing as the younger generations are picking up on the idea of avoiding single-use plastics, making things last longer. They're getting more into creating or designing their own things to fit their personality or to be more sustainable, that they are more interested in the different crafts that we show in the encampment.
Plus also a lot of the patrons that come to, let's say, the Renaissance fairs, they tend to be very crafty themselves, or they really like making their own clothing, their own garb, as we call it, not a costume, but a garb. And so they love seeing the different ideas of what they can do. Or a lot of them just have a love of the history and they want to see, oh, hey, I can make that myself. How do I do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. I like seeing that passion of people at these fairs or the history expos, because people get really into not just like the big events or the big things that we all hear about or love to hear about, but also the little small things too, like how to make candles or hear these little things that people did to pass the time.